nice thing about a self-guided walk is if you are passing through a town and you really love it and you want to spend an hour or two walking around and checking it out, you have the freedom to do that. And so you really do have the autonomy on a self-guided Camino to kind of carve your path as you wish and fill your days the way that you wish. As long as you make it to the next accommodations, it's totally up to you what you do in between then. When you get to the next accommodations, your luggage in the late afternoon is typically already there. So you can check in, head up to your room, freshen up, and then head out to explore the town or village that you're staying in. This is a big part of it. The evenings on the Camino are just as special as the days themselves of walking. You can have dinner in town at a lovely restaurant and then head back, and people tend to go to bed, at a reasonable time to get a good sleep for the days of walking ahead. But I would say that's what a typical day looks like. And as you can tell from that, it's a very simple way of life. And that is the appeal. You wake, you eat, you walk, you eat, you sleep.
Welcome back to the 10 Adventures podcast. Today we're talking about one of the most compelling places to walk on earth. Most people's introduction to walking tours in general. We're talking about the Camino de Santiago. And here to talk with us is Nadine, back on the podcast, back at 10 Adventures after mat leave. Although I think this is your second podcast back since your mat leave, isn't it, Nadine?
It is. Yes. This is number 2. Glad to be back and excited to be talking about such an incredible trail today. There's so much buzz around the Camino and there's so much to talk about. So I'm looking forward to digging into it with you guys.
One thing I love is you meet people who you'd never think would do a walking holiday. Uh, and then all of a sudden they plan to go walk the Camino, and they don't start with, doing a long weekend. They'll walk the Camino Francés over like 4 or 5 weeks. And I just love how the Camino seems to inspire people to do these things that like they didn't know they could do. And
Yeah.
it's just so, so rewarding and so inspiring to see people changing their lives. And the Camino changes people's lives again and again.
It really does. Yeah, it's such a special trail. And you're right. I call it the Camino bug. It's sort of the idea of the Camino pops up in someone's head and they get very excited about it and they want to learn about it. And you're right. People often just kind of dive head in. And because it is an accessible and approachable trail, it does give you that ability to kind of go right in for it from the beginning and maybe bite off a longer section rather than a shorter one to begin. Because, yeah, in general, the Camino is really beginner friendly. So we're always happy to help people plan the Camino, and it's always a really exciting thing to be able to do.
And I think what's interesting with the Camino is it's the Tour de Mont Blanc does this, but the Camino has people doing the Camino year after year. And you'll
Yes.
meet people that have walked the Camino Frances 3 or 4 times. They'll walk the Camino Portuguese twice, the Camino Portuguese Coastal or the Camino Inglés. And it's like they just keep coming back. And
Yeah.
it's rare that people like something, walking tours so much they'll do it again and again unless there's an issue. But the Camino it's addictive, isn't it?
That's the Camino bug right there, the Camino bug effect. And I think because it is such an extensive network of trails, there is always another part of the Camino to explore. And there is such a strong sense of community on that trail as well that people just do become addicted to it. And it's a great, positive, healthy thing to be addicted to.
Yeah, it's one of those few addictions that you're gonna lose weight, be happier,
Exactly.
have more joy, have the time to process and like disconnect. And yeah, it's one of those
You
few
got
addictions you're
it.
gonna come back healthier at the end.
All positive stuff. Absolutely.
So our goal today is to answer kind of the common questions that people have around like what's it like to be in a Camino? What's the history of the Camino? What are the differences between all these Caminos? And a lot of people don't realize when they first contact our team that, oh, there's a bunch of different routes. It's one of these weird walking tours where like part of the decision is which one do you want to go do. And you could do a variety of routes in Spain, a few different routes in Portugal, and even there's a route in France that is
Yep.
growing in popularity. And we had a guest, I think 3 or 4 months ago, Jennifer Andrews, and she sold me on adding the Puy Camino to my bucket list. Now, I don't know if we're going to talk about Le Puy here today, but we're going to talk about all the kind of the common ones in Spain and Portugal.
Yeah, we touch on Le Puy briefly. It's definitely worth noting. So I'll be sure to mention that as we talk about the different route plans for sure.
Okay, so let's start with like, what's the history of the Camino de Santiago? Most people know it's a pilgrimage, but that's all they know. Can you maybe give a bit more details?
Yeah, this is one of the most common questions. What is the Camino? It's a buzzword. There's so many people interested in doing it, but how did it start? How does it work? The Camino is also commonly known as the Way of St. James. So essentially, it's a network, an extensive network of pilgrimage routes, all leading to Santiago de Compostela in Spain, um, in northwestern Spain. Tradition says that St. James was actually buried in Santiago de Compostela. And this began in the ninth century with a hermit supposedly discovering his tomb there. And with this revelation came the want for Christians from all over Europe to want to make their way to pay homage and experience that spiritual aspect of, being close to the Saint James. And so in the ninth century, that's kind of when it began. That's when people began flocking to this site. By the 16th century, we kind of see the popularity of the Camino declining a bit. This is due to war, plague, the Reformation. Things were quiet around there for a little while, but again, in the 20th century, it was declared UNESCO World Heritage Site. The infrastructure really began to be built around it, making it approachable and accessible for a wide range of people. And this is when we start to see hikers and walkers and cyclists flocking to the Camino and beginning to do it as a leisurely, in some cases challenging as well, long distance route in Europe. And it's just gained popularity year over year. The infrastructure has improved year over year as well, making it just a great, ideal long distance walking or cycling path to tackle. And again, amazing because it is so extensive, you can just keep going and do Camino after Camino after Camino if that's what you're looking to do.
And so I wonder if you can talk a little bit about why it's enduring in popularity and maybe reflect on some of the feedback we get from people that book their trip with 10 Adventures about like their experience and again why people come back and will book the same Camino Frances, 2 years in a row with us.
Yeah, I think that the most common feedback is the Camino really gives you the unique opportunity to kind of return to a very simple way of life. You wake, you eat, you walk, you eat, you sleep, and do it all again. Granted, you're doing this in, lovely, charming, villages, some on the coast, some inland. You're experiencing in different European cultures along the way, whether you're walking in Spain or Portugal or France. So all of those things combined with the ability to find a sense of inner peace and self-discovery as you're walking, it really is a trip and a route that combines, sure, the physical challenge of doing something really awesome, walking however many stages you're going to walk from point A to point B, but at the same time, there's this unique aspect of a spiritual side of it for many people that is very attractive. And so I think the Camino allows you the time to slow down, to, be introspective. If you have something like a big life decision that you're trying to make, a lot of people walk the Camino and they think a lot about it, whether it's on a solo trip or with others in their family or friends. It just gives you time to slow down, detach from the digital world in many cases, and yeah, for a lot of people, it's just this really special experience of self discovery. And you don't always find that with trips. There are many long distance walking paths across Europe, but I think that the fact that this one is steeped in so much history, and it does, provide so many opportunities for long distance walks. It really is a special type of trip compared to many others.
I think one thing that's really interesting is you mentioned kind of this spirituality to this, and I've talked to a lot of people who are dealing with loss or grief or
Hmm.
challenge, trying to find their pace, their place in life.
Yeah.
And when you go on a Camino, you meet so many people who kind of have these deep introspective thoughts. And in my day to day life, I never have those discussions. When
Yeah.
you're at a soccer, watching your kids play soccer, you're picking up the kids from school, you're out with friends, you kind of have these superficial discussions, but the Camino bringing all these people together who you're kind of searching for something or asking questions or just they're the first time they've been disconnected from their phone or their office, there's an energy to what it is, and it reminds me when I, read about people that would go to Woodstock or people that would, go to these large gatherings of people. There's just this energy you don't get in modern society because everyone is just they're just really open, and I think that's something that is really I think that's one of the draws is just you have a connection with people. You make friends deeper in a week or 2 in the Camino than you would in, 10 years of, your son's or your child's soccer team. It's really wild.
Exactly. Yeah, it's about that Camino community, and it is really it runs deep, and that is time and time again always one of the points of feedback we get from our guests. I met amazing people that you would have no idea. I just didn't think it would be possible to meet so many amazing people on one trip, and it is because a lot of like-minded people. They're there for the same reason. They're turning inward. They're looking to connect. And there's ample opportunities for that on the Camino. That is also why it's a really popular trail for solo walkers and cyclists, because again, there is that opportunity in the accommodations you're staying in or along the trail itself to meet people. I worked with one guest, Beverly, who walked the complete Camino Francés from start to finish for her 70th birthday. She was walking solo, but on the day of her 70th birthday, she had sent me a photo of her on the trail with her little tiara and her happy birthday banner. And she was surrounded by like 8 or 9 other women. And she was like, "These are my friends I've made on this trail. And we all met up today to celebrate my birthday." And it's like, wow, that is so, so cool. And I guarantee you that, she stayed in touch with many of those people. So again, it is just such a unique trail in that way that it really does bring people together and they're connected on a deeper level for sure.
I want to talk a little bit before we go into the individual Caminos about the idea of a self-guided Camino, because I know a lot of people think I can't handle carrying my bag with all my stuff. And the idea of like a self-guided, it's kind of new. People really understand doing it all yourself, and people
Hmm.
really understand joining a guided group where the guide's leading you. Self-guided for me is like this new superpower way to travel where you don't worry about any of the details, but you still get everything planned for you, and you kind of you have more control over your trip. Can you maybe talk about what a self-guided Camino entails and what people really love about it?
Yeah, so we specialize in self-guided Caminos. While we do offer a few guided trips, we definitely specialize in the self-guided trip, and that is the trip type that has skyrocketed in popularity. Essentially, on a self guided trip, you have the autonomy to traverse the route at your own pace with either, yourself or people that you love and care about. So, friends or family. You're not as part of a mixed group with other travelers. You obviously don't have a guide on a self guided route. But what you do have is the support in the planning process and also during the tour itself. So, at 10 Adventures, we handle everything in the booking phase. So, getting all of your accommodations booked, answering all of your questions. And there are always many questions from people walking the Camino, and that's what we're here for. Your luggage is transferred from accommodation to accommodation while you walk each day. So that's a huge asset, especially for a trip where you really, you want to be able to slow down and take it in. And I think not having your backpack on your back really does provide an optimal opportunity for that. So on a self-guided trip, you're given the route materials so that you can navigate the trail. That being said, the Camino is one of the best waymarked trails in Europe. And so it is quite hard to get lost on the Camino. There's really, really good marking on the trail. And there are also a lot of other people walking the Camino typically at any given moment. So it is a trail in and of itself. Without the route materials, that is easy to follow, but we provide you with those. So you've got a breakdown of the stage by stage, the maps, you know what you're doing each day, where to stop for lunch, and that type of thing. So I always say for self guided, think of it as doing it all on your own. A lot of people like that independent trip style where they're not held back by a group or, working with a guide. You get to do it on your own, but you have none of the headache that typically comes with that. Booking the Camino can be challenging. All of the partners we work with on the Camino are trusted vetted teams that have been working on the Camino for years and years and years. So they've got great partnerships established with the Camino hotels that can be kind of challenging to piece together and book. If you think about the complete Francés, that's 36 days without any rest days. So that would be 35 hotel reservations you'd have to go online and make yourself, and it can be a headache. And so yeah, that's where we come in, and I think that's why the self-guided option is just so popular for our guests.
Yeah, I think the self-guided, what I really love is I can start and stop whenever I want. And
Yes,
it sounds small, but it's like some days, like if it's gonna be super hot, I don't wanna wait till 9 to get walking. I might wanna start walking at 6 a.m. or
that's a great
even skip
point.
breakfast just to get out onto the trail. Also, some days you just fall in love with a village or a place you're walking through. It's like, I wanna stay here for an hour and just relax and enjoy the moment. And
Yeah.
I definitely love guided trips, but I think for the Camino, I really like the self-guided. And the other nice thing is it's customizable. And so
Yes.
you mentioned the complete 36-day route. I've realized I need at least 1 day a week as a
Of
rest day.
rest.
And actually,
Yes.
I enjoy, like, you come to a bigger town or a pretty town. It's nice just to spend a day eating the great food, drinking 4 coffees before noon, walking around. And, when you do a self-guided, you're not on someone else's trip. It's exactly for you. And,
Yeah.
uh, I'm not even gonna talk about the luggage transfers, having just a small pack with some water, some bread, and some cheese.
It's ideal.
It's
It's
it's it's
ideal.
ideal. Um,
Yeah.
let's switch gears. I know a lot of people ask me, when I've done pilgrimages, "Oh, you must be really religious." And I think there's a common view that you have to be religious to walk the Camino. And what are your thoughts on this, Nadine?
Common question for sure. The answer is, of course, it started as an ancient pilgrim's route. But today people walk the Camino for a multitude of reasons. And those reasons are often beyond religion. So while you can walk it for religious purposes, for a lot of people, again, it's about personal growth, time to disconnect, a physical challenge for some people. They're just looking for a cool adventure and they've heard of the Camino and they want to do it. Really, there's a wealth of reasons you could walk the Camino, and that absolutely does not have to be tied to religion.
Is there a type of person who the Camino is perfect for? Like, I know for some trips they're really good for, like, really kind of active, younger people who, like, you think of going trekking in the Himalayas. Some of those trips are pretty tough. We also have e-bike trips in parts of Europe that, like, anyone can do.
Yeah.
What's the Camino like? Who's it good for?
Yeah. And I mean, you kind of think, oh, this is an easy answer to give, but really, the Camino is a trip for just about anyone. I'll give an example just to share kind of the accessibility of the Camino. I was working with a brother and sister, adult brother and sister, and they wanted to walk the Camino with their mother, who was a bit older. They asked, is there any way my mother could walk the first 10 kilometers with us each day and then, have a taxi pick her up and bring her to the next location to make this accessible and doable for her? The answer is absolutely yes. Because there's so many opportunities for customizing the Camino in terms of how many stages you're walking over how many days, whether you're looking to do a longer route, but you want to split the stages in two so they're shorter chunks. The options are endless, which I think really makes the Camino such an accessible route, like it was for that family of three, and their mom was able to walk with them. Um, so I would say the Camino is for just about anyone who's looking for a unique adventure, but also that aspect of being able to disconnect, turn inward, some personal growth involved in there. Families love the Camino. It's a really special family experience as well. You're staying at, small locally run B&Bs and hotels where you can all gather for meals. Sometimes that looks like extended family meeting up from different parts of the country or different continents to join on the Camino and walk together. And you mentioned earlier, it does give you that opportunity to just slow down and have those conversations that you wouldn't have in everyday life. And I think that's what makes it a great choice for family and friends as well. Solo travelers, a great trip for solo travelers. We find for a lot of female solo travelers that it's a very popular route because of the safety and the infrastructure, and that it is a fairly populated route as well. Again, you meet so many people on the Camino that for solo travel, it is a really, really great trip type because people tend tend to be very open on the Camino. People want to sit down and have dinner together. They say, meet me in this town and we'll have lunch. So really, I've listed just about every type of traveler there: couples, families, solo, people with great physical ability and perhaps less physical ability. There really is a Camino for anyone.
You mentioned a little bit about the types of accommodations, and I know this is again another question I hear all the time. Like, oh, aren't don't you have to stay in hostels? Don't you stay in nunneries and things like that? And it is possible, but there's lots of different options. Can you maybe talk a bit about what accommodations are like on the Camino?
Yeah. So across the board, on any Camino you book with 10 Adventures, you're always going to have a private room and a private washroom. And this is really important for a lot of our guests. Again, when you hear Camino, a lot of people think of the Pellegrinos, the hostels where you're sharing bunk beds in a room with a few different people. Um, as the Camino has grown in popularity, so have the accommodation options. And so when you're booking a Camino with 10 Adventures, you're usually going to be looking at one of two options: kind of standard 2-star bed and breakfast, small hotels, those which we would call kind of the standard Camino package. But what is even more popular for our guests that are looking for a little bit of added comfort are the deluxe options. So you can walk the Camino and stay in really lovely, hand-picked, still very historical. Don't think 5-star massive resort or anything like that. These are really charming, small, in many cases. The Parador is a very good example. They've got many Paradors along the Camino, and that's part of the deluxe hotel lineup. So whether you're looking to kind of just have a place to sleep that's clean and comfortable, or you're looking for an accommodation that's upgraded with more amenities, more comfortable rooms, there are options for both of those. Again, making this trip so accessible for a very varying budget as well.
I think what's incredible, the upgraded hotels, it's not that much more. And there is something after a hard day's walking, coming back to an upgraded stay to like a little, historical deluxe hotel. There's just something that it's like the most luxury. I don't know, sometimes just having a shower is a luxury, but there's something it's like, oh man, I paid, $100 more and this is just out of this world. So,
Yeah, that's
um,
the feedback. People are often surprised and they say, "Can you quote this in the standard hotels and the luxury?" And they see the difference and they're like, "Oh, that's a no-brainer. I'll go for the luxury." They're both really reasonably priced. When we think here in North America, luxury resort, we think of the price tag that comes with that. On the Camino, the deluxe options are actually quite affordable.
yeah, it's there's this term in travel called barefoot luxury. So it, as you said, it's not a Hyatt or a Four Seasons, but it's like a historical, charming place with a cast of people who run it. Usually it's a family and they care so deeply about their community and about their hotel. It can really make a trip, that extra special. If you're celebrating an anniversary or birthday or doing something, I just think it's just so special.
Yes, it absolutely is. And that's why it's such a popular choice for our guests.
Can you talk a little bit about what a typical day is? Because I know people, sometimes they're surprised by what walking the Camino might be.
Yeah, for sure. So again, with a self-guided Camino, you really are in the driving seat when it comes to dictating what time you get started. But a typical day starts with waking up, bringing your luggage to the designated drop-off area within the accommodation that you're staying at. That's usually done before breakfast, so that your bags can be picked up and transferred while you're walking. Then usually you'll head down to breakfast. The time will be stipulated at check-in, what time that'll happen at. In a lot of cases, if you like to get started really early and breakfast doesn't start that early, sometimes the accommodations are able to offer breakfast to go, where they just package something up and you can grab it and head out the door, which is really handy as well. Again, one of the flexible aspects of the Camino. But typically, you'd have breakfast at the hotel, check out. And head out on the trail to complete that day's stage. Along the way, you're going to see historical sites, some stunning architecture, like beautiful villages as you're walking from point A to point B on a given stage. A lot of people opt to stop for lunch at a village or town along the way. That's a popular option. On some Caminos, picnic lunches can be included as a supplemental service. So that'll be prepared by the accommodation. That's for kind of people that just want to have a plan to walk and keep going and have their lunch on hand. And like you mentioned earlier, the nice thing about a self guided walk is if you are passing through a town and you really love it and you want to spend an hour or two walking around and checking it out, you have the freedom to do that. And so you really do have the autonomy on a self guided Camino to kind of carve your path as you wish, and fill your days the way that you wish. As long as you make it to the next accommodations, it's totally up to you what you do in between then. When you get to the next accommodations, your luggage in the late afternoon is typically already there. So you can check in, head up to your room, freshen up, and then head out to explore the town or village that you're staying in. This is a big part of it. There's often a lot to see and do and experience in these, even if they're smaller places. There's going to be cathedrals, historical castles, that type of thing that you'll want to explore. And so the evenings on the Camino are just as special as the days themselves of walking. You can have dinner in town at a lovely restaurant and then head back, and people tend to go to bed, at a reasonable time to get a good sleep for the days of walking ahead. But I would say that's what a typical day looks like. And as you can tell from that, it's a very simple way of life. And that is the appeal. Like I said, you wake, you eat, you walk, you eat, you sleep.
I think one thing that's funny is Spaniards typically later than us in North America, and when you're done your Camino, like for the day, you're hungry, and so what you find is that often you're having a meal at 3, or there's a few restaurants that have like a Camino service. They open an hour or two early because they know there's all the pilgrims that they can't wait till like 8 o'clock at night to eat. They gotta eat at 5. So it's kind of funny that you're right. You want to eat, get refueled, and then often like, yeah, 9 o'clock,
You're
you're
ready
heading
for
for
bed.
pillow. Yeah, you're not out carousing.
Yeah, I think that's an important one to note. That is a question we get a lot. Do I have to wait till 9 or 10 p.m. to eat dinner? Like, how am I going to do that? Obviously, we've mentioned the great infrastructure on the Camino and the services and amenities available to guests. Like you've said, a lot of people will eat when they get into a town. At check-in, sometimes you have the opportunity to request an earlier dinner if there is a dinner included at the hotel. But most times, you're going to be eating in the towns, and there will be places that open up before 8 or 9 p.m. when the Spanish guests will be heading out to eat dinner.
Before we go and talk about the actual routes, I just want to talk about the walking because I know North Americans, especially, we're expecting these, forest paths, mountain paths, very, very secluded, like you'd get in a national park. The
Mhm.
Camino has some of that, but it has lots of other types. Can you talk a little bit about what the walking is in terms of the type of terrain and the difficulty, maybe some of the challenges?
So the Camino really varies depending on the route that you're taking. While there are some easier, flatter routes, there are also some stages and sections of the Camino where you're going to have some pretty moderate to significant elevation changes. Nothing like if you were trekking in the Alps, but still a decent challenge. And I think part of choosing to walk the right Camino for you is understanding how much of a physical challenge you want. It's important to note that there is quite a lot of road walking on the Camino as well. So that's going to be like, loose gravel, dirt road type thing, um, uh, and undulating territory as well as you're going through various stages on the Portuguese way, the vineyards that you're going to be passing through, that type of thing. Lots of forested paths. There's a lot of riverside walking on the Portuguese way as well. So the terrain varies from trip to trip, but generally, you should be prepared on the Camino for a bit of a challenge. I think the fact that you can customize a lot of these routes, splitting some of those more difficult stages, especially where there is quite a bit of elevation, helps to make it a bit more approachable to a wider range of guests.
Let's move on to talking about the different Caminos because often people come and say, "I just want to walk the Camino," and then they're like, "Oh no, which one do I choose?" And there's kind of some core Caminos, and there's some also ones that are less popular, but just as beautiful, if not more beautiful. So let's maybe start with the main Camino that most people think of, the Camino Francés. Can you tell a little bit about that route and what makes it unique and special?
Yeah. So I would say definitely the Camino Frances is going to be the most popular variant on the Camino. As a result, also the busiest. It's 780 kilometers total, starting from Saint Jean Pied de Port in France and running all the way to Santiago de Compostela over, I believe, 35 stages. If it's a 36-day trip, day one is arrival. We do offer that at 10 Adventures as a complete route, but we also have a ton of broken down sections of the Camino Francés, meaning there's a lot of options to walk it, whether you have 7 days or 36 days. It's the best supported route. So with the most frequent accommodations and, decent sized towns along the route, it's a great choice for people that are looking for destinations with a lot of amenities. So a lot of shops, cafes, restaurants, even in the smaller towns, you'll still find that there are amenities along this route, whereas some of the other more rural routes can be a little bit less in that area. You've got legendary, famous Camino towns like Pamplona, Burgos, Leon. There's just a wide range of attractive towns along this route that make it quite special and iconic Camino towns, I would say. Depending on what stage you walk, on the French Way, you're going to find a mix of mountains, the Pyrenees in the start, plains, vineyards, forested hills, charming small villages, like I said, but it's a really culturally immersive route. And so I think on this trip, you really do get a taste for the Spanish culture, especially in those smaller towns and villages along the way where their traditions are so strong and their cuisine very regional and special. So yeah, I would say the French Way is a great option for people looking to just get their feet wet on the Camino. It's also a great option for people that are looking to walk a section, go home, come back maybe, 6 months or a year later, walk another section. If you don't feel confident that you could complete the whole 36-day route in one go, you can complete it in sections. And we have had guests do that before.
And I think we have 5 sections. We break the whole route into 5 sections.
Yeah.
And then lots of people do like the last 200 kilometers, the last 300 kilometers,
Yeah.
which is kind of, they can just walk the last, or they can do the
Last,
last 100
yeah.
kilometers, 200 kilometers, 300
Yeah.
kilometers. So lots of options for people that can't commit to taking 5 weeks off of work or off their life.
Exactly.
They have some 10, 12, 15-day options.
Longer ones as well. Yeah, that 7-day from Sevilla to Santiago is very popular. That's that last 100 kilometers of the French Way. And you'll find on that route, there's some really great hotels, upgraded hotel options. So a lot of people opt to walk that last 100 kilometers of the Camino Frances and stay in really charming kind of historical upgraded hotels as well.
Moving on from the French Way, we also have the Camino Portuguese, which is actually two different routes that meet up kind of in near Santiago. But can you talk a little bit about the Camino Portuguese and then maybe give some details on each of the different routes?
Yeah, so as you may have guessed from the name, the Camino Portuguese starts in Portugal, gives you the opportunity to not just experience Spain, but also experience Portugal as well. Having got married myself in Portugal, I could say it's a country well worth exploring, absolutely beautiful. In general, the Camino Portuguese, I had a meeting with two ladies yesterday, and it's going to be their first Camino. And I actually recommended the Camino Portuguese to them as first time walkers. Generally, the terrain tends to be a little bit gentler than the French Way. The stages, on average, a bit shorter, milder climate that you have, and the infrastructure on the Camino Portuguese is just as excellent as it is on the French Way. So lots of stops for accommodation, shops, restaurants, services to support hikers and cyclists as they're going. Another bonus of the Camino Portuguese is that you start in Porto. You can spend a few days in Porto before you begin your Camino, and it's a beautiful city with lots to do, so much to see, great food. So many people will fly in 2 to 3 days before they begin their Camino Portuguese and enjoy Porto. And we're always happy to book those nights for you, or you can book those hotels independently. So think gentle hills, riverside paths, walkers looking for maybe less of a challenge than they would if had they started with the French Way, I would say. For this one as well, we have the complete route of the Portuguese Central Way route. So that differs from the Portuguese Coastal Way, and that is a little bit confusing for some people. They think, oh, it's just one Portuguese Way Camino. It actually, like you said, splits and you can do either or. So on the Portuguese Way Central route, it's 240 kilometers, starts in Porto, ends in Santiago. It heads inland through Barcelos, Ponte de Lima, Tui on the Spanish border. quieter than the French way, but still very popular. And then you have the Portuguese coastal way. To many people, this is noted as the most beautiful variant scenery wise. Depending on the exact stages, the Portuguese coastal way is generally 280 kilometers to 300. There are a ton of variants on this particular path. The complete route is 15 days, but you can break that down into a number of segments. Sometimes doing the last 100 kilometers, sometimes starting at Bayona instead of starting in Porto. So there's lots and lots of options. But on the coastal way, you've got a ton of, really beautiful fishing villages, coastal towns, endless sea views, beaches, dunes. If you're someone that enjoys coastal scenery and the coastal breeze while walking, I think that the Portuguese coastal way is always an excellent choice. And the feedback on this particular variant is always incredible. Of course, you have the seafood to look forward to being on the coast as well.
And again, I say this every time we talk about a coastal walk, but like after a hard day's walking to go and jump in the ocean,
Yes, we forgot to
especially
mention
it
that.
is it's
Yeah.
again one of those things that it's kind of incredible how some things they don't cost anything,
Yeah.
but yeah, some of my best memories is just like a hot day jumping in the ocean after a hard day's walking. It's just
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it can make the trip.
It can make the trip, absolutely, just to refresh in that way. Speaking of coastal routes, a little bit of a less common. So we've got the Portuguese Camino, the French way. Those are the two that most people have likely heard of. There are a number of other variants that you can walk. Just following that trail of the coastal routes, there is a northern coastal route that you can walk. It's a long one as well, this variant. So it's 825 kilometers from Iran on the French border. I run all the way to Santiago. This is interesting because you pass through a lot of unique cultural landscapes on this trip. So you go through the Basque country. You've got Cantabria, Asturias, and then you enter into Galicia as you make your way to Santiago de Compostela. So as you can imagine, just the range in food and culture along that on that full route is really, really immersive and a cool experience. The complete route is 36 days, much quieter than those two more popular routes that we talked about. It can be biked, it can be hiked, and it's a special experience for sure.
One hard thing on the Camino del Norte is it's really hard to book in July and August because that
Yes.
whole coast is just so popular with holidaymakers, just, great beaches and towns to explore. And so if you want to do it in summer, you really got to plan well, well in advance. A lot of people like to do it in spring and autumn when the weather's a bit cooler as well. But yeah, it's just an incredible. I've been to a lot of the towns. I've never walked it, but just an incredible itinerary.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, the feedback on that one is always great for sure.
Okay, let's talk about the Camino Inglés. It's one of the shorter ones and
Mhm.
a really interesting route, I think.
Yeah, so as we've seen, Camino Francés, full thing 36, Camino Portuguese, full thing 15. The Camino Inglés is a nice short route. If you want to complete a complete Camino route from start to finish and you only maybe have just over a week, the Camino Inglés can be walked in just 8 days. Historically, it was completed by English pilgrims heading to Santiago de Compostela. It runs 120 kilometers total from Ferrol to Santiago. It's perfect for those looking for a shorter Camino that are short on time, and also those looking to beat the crowds of the Portuguese way and the French way. It's a special route, some lovely towns along the way, and again, just that asset of being able to complete it from start to finish. I know that's important for a lot of people. They want to say, I started and I completed this trail. It's a good bite-sized chunk of the Camino to bite off and complete in just over a week.
Let's talk a little bit about the Camino Primitivo. It's one that's um, it's really not as well known as even the other ones we've mentioned. Can you maybe share a bit about that?
Yeah, interestingly enough, it is one that our guests have booked quite a few times, even though, like you've said, it is not on the radar of a lot of people. Both for cycling and biking, it's possible. Camino Primitivo translates to the original way, so it's actually the oldest variant, which you would think would kind of make it more of a popular variant if people wanting to do the original way. That being said, it is a very authentic, more raw route, many rural, rugged areas on this route. And the infrastructure, therefore, is not as developed as it is along the Portuguese way or the French way. That being said, you do have the opportunity to really kind of achieve that sense of solitude on this route since it's not an overpopulated or busy route. There are plenty of opportunities to kind of, some days it'll just be you and the person you're walking with, and you'll pass people every so often. But it's a special route in that, yes, it's the oldest, dates right back to the ninth century. So for some people, that's quite special. And those looking for a real authentic Camino experience, I would say, without some of the frills, it's quite challenging to find upgraded deluxe hotels on this route. Things are quite basic, but again, that's part of the charm for people that are looking for it. So this Camino Primitivo starts in Oviedo and it runs 320 kilometers in its entirety, ending in Santiago de Compostela.
Let's switch into France. We talked a little bit earlier about the Puy Camino, and this is one that's just shot up my bucket list in terms of walks I want to do. Can you talk a little bit about the Puy Camino? Because it is definitely one that's kind of off of most Camino bucket lists because it doesn't end in Santiago.
Yeah, so the Le Puy Camino, again, maybe not a Camino that you've heard of. The biggest difference here being this Camino does not end in the famous and legendary Santiago de Compostela. It ends in a town that we've actually mentioned earlier on the podcast, Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port in France. And so this route to the Le Puy stretches 750 kilometers, starting in Le Puy, ending in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. And as you can imagine, for those with that Camino bug that we've talked about, a lot of people will do the Le Puy Camino and then start the French Way Camino in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port and keep going all the way to Santiago. You'd have to have a good chunk of vacation time for that because that would take quite a while, but it is definitely popular. This particular Camino in France is known to have stages where these are known as some of the most beautiful towns and villages in France. So you've got Conques, Cahors, Le Puy is another beautiful town. This route is known for its stunning medieval architecture, charming French countryside, and a really great food as well, of course. Differentiates itself from the Spanish route, where, you've got the regional flavors of Spain, but on this trip, you've got some really incredible French food along the way also.
I mentioned we had a guest, Jennifer Andrews, on the podcast, and she sold me on this so much that a couple weeks ago I reached out to her and said, Jennifer, my wife and I are thinking of walking a part of the Le Puy next year. We really want to see these great, I love charming villages.
Yeah.
What section would you recommend? And she said the part from Le Puy to Cahors, which is actually
Uh-huh.
about 18 days. She says that's just spectacular with just beautiful villages, beautiful walking.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's if you want to learn more about the Le Puy, go back and I think, geez, it was probably 3 or 4 months ago, but a great book and a great discussion about the Le Puy Camino because it just seems, for what I like it, I love great villages, great food, and
Yeah.
nice walking. It just seems about perfect.
Yeah, it really does. It's a special one for sure.
Nadine, I want to talk about two other Camino kind of variants that, some people add on. The first is the Camino Invierno, and then
Mhm.
often people will do the Camino Finisterre, which is kind of the opposite of all these Caminos in that it starts in Santiago. Can you just give a little bit of information on both of these? Because I know sometimes people wonder, what are these 2?
Yeah. So the Finisterre way, I had a call with two ladies talking about the Camino, like I said yesterday. And one of them at the end of the call said, what if we want to go to the end of the world? That end of the world place? And I went, oh, Finisterre. Yes, of course. Like you said, unlike many of the other Camino variants, the Finisterre way starts in Santiago and makes its way down to the end of the world, Cape Finisterre. I believe it's a 6-day walk total. For some people, they bite that off as a whole other walking tour to add on to their main Camino, ending in Santiago and then starting the Finisterre way. You can continue to walk on a self-guided basis. For other people, it looks like a day trip. So I've worked with a group, and after they've finished their Portuguese way, they're all taking a transfer to Finisterre and Mujia for the day, to explore, and then heading back to stay in Santiago. If you prefer to spend the night there, you can also do that. We have sometimes booked guests to spend the night in Finisterre. It's definitely a sight to behold, to feel like you're right at the edge of the world on the coast there. And I think that's why it's such a popular add-on for people that are going to be in Santiago. It's like if we've come all this way, we may as well just continue and see Finisterre as well. And then we have, yes, the Camino Invierno. Again, maybe not one that many people have heard of. This is translates to the winter way. So we talked a little bit about the special aspect of solitude on the Camino on those other routes. If you were really looking for an added measure of solitude, walking the Camino on the Invierno way is a great fit in that case. Of course, most people are going to be walking the Camino in spring, summer, and fall. We mentioned earlier a lot of services start to close down in November for the off season. On the Invierno way, there are services that are open during this period of the year so that people can walk on the winter way. And this gives them the opportunity to travel a lesser traveled time of year where there's not a ton of other pilgrims around, but a really special journey because you do have that sense of, being the only ones on the Camino and walking. This can be completed as a full route, or you can do the last 100 kilometers. Definitely not as popular as some of those other Camino routes that we talked about. But for some people, this is the way they want to go, and they want to travel a historic journey through the Galician countryside and the wine regions and experience that when no one else is around. So there's an option for that as well.
I think what makes it really interesting is you go if you've done the Camino in the summer, these towns are packed with pilgrims. There's a vibrancy. When you do the Invierno, like a lot of the towns shut down, and so it's like kind of like this hauntingly beautiful villages. Um, and I know in over the holiday season, often you get a lot of walkers who are trying to coincide with, you know, arriving in Santiago on New Year's Eve or Christmas Day or things like that. So you do get some walkers then, but other times in, November, early December, January, and February, you might be
Quiet.
the only group walking that day,
Yeah.
which is unique. And I know I always talk about walking the Via Francigena last year. There was only 13 people that were walking our day, and it was really kind of fun and intimate to have that like really authentic experience. And I think that's what the Invierno gives you is this authenticity because this is just how these villages and how these paths are when there's no pilgrims there.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, you could be staying in the only accommodation open in a given town or village during that time. And that is a special kind of feeling for sure.
How do you help people choose the right variant?
Yes, great question. A lot of people come to us at 10 Adventures and say, I want to do the Camino, but I don't really know what Camino I want to do. And that's always an area we're happy to help in. The most obvious being, time frame. How long do you have on this trip? Is it 7 days? Is it 10 days? Is it 3 weeks? That's a big consideration because we can then say, okay, you can walk the complete Portuguese way, or you should probably go for the last 100 kilometers over 8 days. So time frame is a really big one. Another one is what type of challenge are you looking for? Are you looking to walk a complete route from start to finish over 36 days, or are you looking to walk the last 100 kilometers? Are you looking for some more elevation, more undulating terrain, or are you looking for a flatter portion of the trail? These are all considerations. One thing that you'll note on 10 Adventures when you look at our Camino itineraries, some of them have slower paced or slower Camino in the tour name. These are Caminos where we've taken something such as the last 100 kilometers of the French Way, and instead of doing it over 7 days, we break it down into 11 or 12 days. So those longer stages are split up. So when you're considering, what you want to do, it's always a good idea to have an amount of, the maximum kilometers you want to walk in a day, the maximum duration, and how many days you want to do that over. And we can then suggest an itinerary on the Camino that works well for you. Another consideration is, of course, what do you want to see on the Camino when you're walking? What do you want to be on the coast? Do you want to be able to jump in the ocean, like you've mentioned, at the end of a long day on the trail? Are you looking for more inland forest areas? Do you love vineyards? What kind of scenery, are you interested in? And again, we can make recommendations based on that. Another consideration that's important is, do you want to be on a livelier route where, the towns and villages are going to be buzzing in the evenings with people walking about? Or do you want, the solitude of the Camino Invierno, where you're going to be the only, five of you staying in one village and only one place to host you is open? Again, just mentioning the accessibility and approachability of the Camino, there are just so many options. And when you want to go also plays into it as well. So there is something really for everyone. Another consideration, an important one we've talked about is, are you looking for more upscale accommodations, or are you good with a comfortable, clean, basic place to rest at night? Again, we would make recommendations based on that in terms of hotels and what the availability of deluxe versus standard accommodations are.
You just mentioned there about what time of the year you wanna go. What are the recommendations for the best time of the year to walk the Camino?
Yeah, great question. So people are often wondering, if I want to do the Camino, when do I go? It depends on the route. There are different routes that are ideal for different times of year. But generally speaking, you can expect April through November to be the best times to walk the Camino, and for the greatest accessibility of services as well. You'll find the busiest season on the Camino, particularly the Portuguese way and the French way, are in that May to June period. So spring, when everything is in bloom and weather is starting to warm up, milder days, and September to October. In particular, these sort of spring and early autumn months are becoming more and more popular. For people wanting to beat the peak tourist summer crowds, and B, because as we know, much of Europe is experiencing increasing temperatures, those really hot months in July and August, which, if you're walking a long distance trail, can be quite cumbersome to face every day. And so you'll find that May and June, September, October, the temperatures are more ideal for walking than, say, sometimes in those peak July, August months. Some routes are available throughout the year, but again, we've talked about the things closing down for the season, limited accommodations, very few restaurants, and that type of thing. The French way cannot be walked all year long, as it starts in the Pyrenees, and there's quite a lot of snow in some of those areas. So that's one route that you can't do, in the winter months, starting right from that start point. But generally speaking, most people who are booking on the Camino are going to be booking from that April period through till the end of November, and it just depends on what you're looking for in terms of walking weather and how many people you want to be traveling on the trails with.
And one thing we're seeing across Europe is these former kind of off-season times are becoming more popular. So, November used to be a time when people wouldn't walk, but autumns are going longer. We're seeing people ask to book in March. I know you mentioned before we chatted how sometimes it's hard to get luggage transfers in the off season in March because that just hasn't started for the year, or it's just, there's just not enough walkers to justify a luggage transfer. So it is interesting to see how travel is evolving, especially adventure travel in Europe right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And I think it continues to evolve each year. And we see that kind of popular period of walking expand, which perhaps it was only in the beginning, June, July, August. You're now seeing that spread further throughout the year on both ends.
One question people ask is this Compostela. What is the Compostela? How does it work? Why is it important?
Yeah, so the Compostela is important to some people, and it is also not as important to others. So it really just depends on, how much emphasis you're putting on the Compostela itself. The Compostela is the official certificate that is your token of completion of the Camino. It's Yeah, essentially for this, you have to walk at least 100 kilometers. That's why a lot of people do walk that last 100-kilometer stage, or cycle at least 200 kilometers. You receive a pilgrim passport as part of your self-guided package on all Camino trips, and you have this pilgrim passport with you while you're walking. You get stamps at some accommodations, cafes, restaurants, that type of thing. And when you arrive, your monumental arrival in Santiago de Compostela, you head to the pilgrim office. they receive your passport, and they then provide you with your Compostela certificate. For a lot of people, it's a symbolic representation, a recognition of the journey they've completed. Again, if you're walking for spiritual reasons or personal growth reasons, it's kind of a nice souvenir to have to bring you back to this is what I achieved on the Camino. And oh, yeah, this, where I had this revelation, or when I made this big decision in my life, or when I walked with my husband for my honeymoon. It is kind of a symbol of that. And people often like to frame it and have it up on their wall.
Okay, last question, Nadine. Let's talk about making a Camino happen. What are the practical planning tips you recommend?
Yeah. So I would say there are a few things to keep in mind when planning the Camino. And this just comes from, again, working with so many guests that are booking the Camino with 10 Adventures. If you're planning the Camino from May through September, now is a good time to start planning, as availability definitely does become challenging, particularly for those looking for those deluxe hotels. This was something I mentioned to the two guests I had that call with yesterday. I said, if you're going to go for the deluxe hotels, let's get that request in ASAP, because those are, of course, the hotels that always book up fast. So if you're looking to hike or bike during those peak months of the year, I would say the sooner the better to get planning. So that's one tip for sure. Connect for a call with us. I think with the Camino, it is one of those, sometimes you send a few back and forth emails and then the person realizes, oh, I've just sent 14 questions to you by email. Can we have a phone call? And it's like, yes, that is the way to go when it comes to the Camino, because as we can see from this discussion, there are so many questions, so many variants, so many things to consider when deciding on what Camino to walk. The best way to go about it is to connect with a travel advisor and chat through the options. Let us know what you're looking for so we can save you a lot of the legwork of, looking online at maps and seeing what might work. We can then just suggest some choices for you. And it makes your life so much easier than trying to tackle that all on your own. Another tip I would say is throw the idea out to friends. If you're thinking about doing the Camino, we talked about the Camino bug earlier. It's like a lot of people have this bug, even if they don't know it yet. They have an idea of the Camino in their head. And when they hear that a friend is walking the Camino, often people jump on board. We see often groups starting with maybe, I had a group start with a solo traveler and it's now four. Three of her friends have decided to join her. I worked with, a group who are walking the Portuguese way this summer. It started as 9 and the group is now 17, because essentially they just threw it out there and, friends caught wind of, oh, you're walking the Camino. I've always wanted to do that. And the group just grows. So even if you're a solo traveler, you don't want to walk solo, throw it out there to some friends and I guarantee you some people will hop on board and join the adventure. It's just that type of trip. Everybody tends to have this one on their bucket list.
I love your suggestion of connect for a call because, the way the world's going right now, everything is being automated and I love technology. I think it does a lot of great things. But with travel, we're all so different and there isn't one solution for everybody. And you
Uh-huh.
can use a chat bot or use Chat GPT, but actually talking with somebody, explaining who you are, letting them share their knowledge, give you some options, having the back and forth. It's just nice to have that human aspect. Um, and it's hard actually. Like I know, it's harder and harder to actually connect with a real human when something goes wrong. I had an issue with a car rental. I probably spent 20 hours on various, phone lines, listening to messages, pressing buttons. At 10 Adventures, like I hate dealing with all those chatbots. It's just real people. And so you don't have to go through all you know, these prompts. You can just arrange a meeting and talk with a real person and, spend 10 minutes and get all the information you need. And that's purposeful. Like we want to have humans helping humans planning their trips because I just think travel is just so important that you don't want to hope the algorithm gets it right. You want to make sure someone who knows it is going to understand you and your needs and then give you the right advice.
Exactly. And, on the Camino, especially with there being so many options, you don't want to end up, biting off more than you can chew or choosing a route that's not right for you. I think it's just a great way to get an idea of what's going to be the best possible Camino experience for you. And often a phone call allows us to do that. Like you said, in just 10 minutes, we can ask you some questions and then suggest some routing based on that. And we're always happy to do that.
Nadine, thank you for sharing all your wisdom and knowledge about the Camino. It's just so nice to have it all here in one place so that we can now share this with people who have questions and let other people discover the joy and the kind of the transformation a Camino can have for them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure. It's been a great topic of discussion. I've had a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to hearing from our listeners with their Camino questions.
And we'll put links to a lot of the stuff we talked about in the show notes. We've written guides on all these Caminos. We have a bunch of different tour options. So if you're wondering where to find out more information, you can just check the show notes and click there. And everyone, thank you for listening to this episode of the 10 Adventures podcast. We'll be back next week to explore the world and hear about more epic adventures. Bye bye. Start planning your own adventure by visiting us at 10adventures.com and listen to other episodes of the 10 Adventures podcast on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you find your podcasts.